Hello and greetings, everyone. I'm Pastor Edwin Strickland, and I serve as the Senior Pastor of Fellowship of Champions Church International, a worldwide ministry helping people to learn to live out their God-given dreams by walking in love and living by faith. And I get to be your host and your guide for this exciting journey that we're about to take that we call Ed Talk with Pastor Strick. Hello. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Ed Talk with Pastor Strick. I am your boy, Pastor Strick, and I am so excited to be here with you today. Listen, I've got an excellent host with us today. You know, here on Ed Talk, we come together every week so we can blend the realms of knowledge, instruction, faith with real world solutions. And so whether you're here today on a quest seeking to expand your knowledge base, whether you want to uplift your spirit or find common ground between the practical and the spiritual, I need to let you know that you have come to the right place. Every week we come together to forge connections, to bridge gaps, spark thought, ignite curiosity, and nurture our souls to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. So without any further ado, let's dive into today's enlightening conversation. And before we do that, you guys know what I ask you to do every single time. Help me with some social media outreach. That's right. I need you to go and knock on some virtual doors. What does that mean? I need you to like the broadcast. I need you to love the broadcast. I need you to tag your friends, tag your family, share it to your page, share it to your story, and let people know Ed Talk with Pastor Strick is live. I see we got people from Little Rock. I see we've got people from Maryland. We've got people from DC. We got people from Virginia. One of our international partners is on here from South Africa. Listen, go ahead and tag your friends and family. They are not going to want to miss who I have in studio with me today. Now, listen, before I bring him on, let me just remind you, there are a multitude of ways that you can connect with Ed Talk. All you have to do is go to www.pastorstrick.com. That takes you directly to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, I'm encouraging you to subscribe to that YouTube channel. That way, when Ed Talk goes live, you'll get notified and you'll know exactly what is going on. If you say, well, YouTube is not really my thing, I'm more of a Spotify guy, I'm more of an iHeartRadio, more of an Apple podcast guy, not a problem. I got you too. All you got to do is go to Pastor Strick Podcast. That's one word, pastorstrickpodcast.com. It'll take you to a landing page so that you can choose the platform you like to engage with. That's right. Ed Talk, we make it easy for you to listen. So if you're a YouTuber, go to pastorstrick.com. It'll connect you directly. If you have any other platforms that you like, Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, whatever it may be, go to pastorstrickpodcast.com and you can get connected. All right. Listen, I'm so excited. I have my childhood friend, an amazing leader, someone who is highly respected, someone who I respect for his leadership skills and his ability to get things done. And as you know, we've been talking the last couple of weeks from this mini series we're doing called The Blueprint. It's called The Blueprint, Lessons from Impactful Leaders. And I'm telling you that it's one thing to love the Lord. It's one thing to be committed to church. It's one thing to be committed to support your local ministry. But there are some practical tools that you need in order to live successful. And this mini series has been awesome. The first week, we had Pastor Sean Strickland. The second week, we had Apostle Stephen Banks, where we talked about healing the father wound. And today I have with me Apostle Pastor E.C. Maltbia. And we are going to be talking about success. And what does it mean to be successful? How do we determine whether we're successful? What are the traits to being successful? And what are the characteristics of being successful? And I'm telling you right now, you do not want to miss this. Now, some of you may not know who this is. So let me take just a moment and tell you who is about to grace us with his presence on screen today. My good friend, Pastor Maltbia, is the founder and the senior pastor of True Holiness Saints Center in Conway, Arkansas, where he has faithfully served as senior pastor for over 30 years. He's also married to his childhood sweetheart, the former Natasha Gatewood. They've been married also for over 3 decades. And God has blessed them with 2 beautiful children, his daughter Kennedy, who works alongside him in ministry. If you follow them, you probably see them on their TikTok Thursdays. And also his son Connor, who is currently working in the insurance industry. Listen, over the years, Pastor Maltbia has demonstrated his leadership, not only as senior pastor of True Holiness Saints Center Incorporated, but also to the city of Conway by serving on the board of directors of the following organizations. He served on the United Way of Faulkner County, the Salvation Army of Faulkner County, the Faulkner County Leadership Institute, the Conway Regional Health System Community Advisory Board, the Community Foundation of Faulkner County, the University of Central Arkansas's inaugural Parent and Family Council, the Arkansas Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, and as a founding member of the Conway Community Race Relations Initiative and the City of Conway Civil Service Commission. In addition to all of that, Pastor Maltbia was also appointed as the chaplain of the state of Arkansas's House of Representatives during the 87th General Assembly. Pastor Maltbia currently serves as a member of the Conway Regional Health System Board of Directors. He serves as chaplain of the Conway Police Department, as well as chaplain for Veasley Funeral Home and Cremations. He's a member of the Conway Ministerial Alliance. And lastly, but not least, Pastor Maltbia was most recently appointed by former Governor Asa Hutchinson to be the University of Central Arkansas's on the University of Central Arkansas's Board of Trustees, where he eventually served as chairman of the board during quite possibly the most stressful time in our nation's recent history, the 2020 COVID pandemic. It is my pleasure to introduce to some and to present to others my childhood friend, my homie, Pastor E.C. Maltbia. Pastor Maltbia, we are so happy to have you, my friend. Are you there?
I'm here now, bro. Strick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Listen, man, as the old folks will say, this is a day the Lord has made, man. We are blessed to be here and highly favored, buddy.
We are. Listen, those of you who are watching, go ahead and put a big hello to Pastor Maltbia in the comment sections. Listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I got tired just reading about all the boards you serve on.
Listen, I got tired listening to it, man.
Listen, when I started doing this, I had several people in mind who I wanted to come and just share with the people who watch the broadcast. And so I'm so excited and so delighted that you are here. And I want everybody who is saying hello to just know that they are in for a treat today. We kind of had a little preview to this when I had a chance to sit down with you when you came to Northwest Arkansas. You don't venture up here too often, but you came up here and we was able to get together and talk a little bit. And I said, man, you got to come on. You got to be a part of this. And I appreciate you for being so gracious and just saying yes.
Listen, Strick, man, I don't know how I was so blessed to be a part of Ed Talk. I've been appreciating what you're doing for years. And for those that don't know, Brother Strickland and I are really childhood friends.
Really?
We've been knowing each other for more than 40 years.
Yeah.
We went to middle school, junior high, high school together. We went to the same church together. We served in ministry there, both at the University of Central Arkansas. Man, I just appreciate what you are doing, not only in Northwest Arkansas, but around the globe.
Well, I appreciate that. And I definitely appreciate all that you're doing. Again, not just in the city of Conway, but every place that you touch. It's funny that you talk about how we went to the same school and everything. I jokingly tell people, we'll get into this other stuff, but I have to say this. See, you and a lot of the other kids, y'all went to what we call the cool elementary. Y'all went to Ellen Smith Elementary School before it was owned by St. Joseph. You went to the old building, not the new one. And I lived in Gold Lake, so they shipped us out there to Florence Madison. And so I remember the first time we met, it was in 6th grade, because at the city that we lived in, we had various elementary schools, but we all came together for 6th grade. And
right.
I got to 6th grade, everybody asking everybody who's who. And I remember everybody saying, that's Cornell, that's Cornell, that's Cornell. I said, man, let me meet Cornell. you were as cool in as you are now. And so I appreciate the lifelong friendship. And indeed, it was you and Keith Harper and your wife, Natasha, who was just Natasha at the time, not just Natasha, but she wasn't Maltbia at the time. And our friend, Dr. Howard, who we now call Toddy, y'all invited me to Zion Temple. And I got saved at a lock-in. September of 1986 was the first time that I really, now my walk ain't been perfect, but it was the first time that I ever acknowledged that I needed a savior. And so we've been connected for a while. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
Man, listen, absolutely. And in fact, you're going to be on here together, man. But listen, really, I really appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate the topic, man, and just excited about getting into it.
All right, so let's do it. So part of our lesson from Impactful Leader today is really going to be surrounded by this idea of success. We live in a time where everybody wants to talk about how they got it out the mud. Everybody started from the bottom. Now they here. Uh, everybody wants to put a certain image on social media to make it look like, you know, they got it all together, and they trying to compete with the next person, and all that's fine and good. But I want to talk with you from the idea about true success and what success looks like. And we understand it can look different for different people, but for all practical purposes, people looking on the outside would more than likely, I would think, would say EC Maltbia is a pretty successful guy. Okay. So my question to you is how do you define success? And like, if you were going to give advice to somebody about success, how would you start that conversation with them?
Sure. Well, I define success very simply. Success in my mind is reaching your God potential, your full potential in God. Whatever that is, that can be in the secular field, that can be in the church, but success is reaching your full potential. And I think you and I talked about as we were meeting. I talk about the parable of the talents. And you know, there was a man who gave his servants responsibilities. He gave them 1 talent. He gave a second one 2 talent. He gave another 5 talents. But what I like about the story was, or what I noted about the story was, he gave each according to their ability. He gave them what they could handle. And here's where I think we have to start. God values all of us equally, no question, but he gives all of us varying talents. That means he gives us varying skill levels, aptitude, experience, a passion for this or that. We all have different talents. And so because we have different talents, it is very dangerous for us to compare what you see as success and what I see as success. Because you might be a 5 talent person, I might be a 2 talent person. It doesn't mean that one of us is valued any more than the other. It just means that that is our level of aptitude, expertise, skill level, whatever the case is. And so in my mind, success is reaching your full potential in God. But that also says to us, and you mentioned this just a moment ago, when you understand that success looks differently from everybody, it looks different from me than it does you, from Pastor Sean to First Lady Natasha to others, then I have to decide that the only person I'm truly competing with is the man in the mirror. The only person that I'm truly competing with is the guy I was yesterday. So then I can celebrate you for what you're doing, and you can celebrate me for what I'm doing. But here's the dangerous part about this. This is why it's so important to know is reaching your individual God potential. Because if you start comparing yourself to other people, one of 2 things can happen. If I'm a 2 talent person and I'm doing all I can and I double that, I get the 4 talents. And if you're a 5 talent person and you just kind of breeze through, but you still make it to 7 talents, I can look at you because you're at 7 and feel inferior to you when I'm really maximizing my potential more than you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I'm a 5 talented person and you're a 2 talented person and you have maxed out at 4 and I'm cruising at 7, I can feel like I'm superior to you when I haven't even scratched the surface of what God wants me to do. So the first thing we've got to do is figure out how to maximize our full potential and understand that the only person you're competing with is yourself.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost akin to staying in your lane. You know,
Yes.
if you're in your lane, you can navigate traffic so much better than if you're in
Yes,
somebody else's lane. The thing I like about that, you use that story in the Bible. The only person who really got in trouble was the person who didn't maximize what they were given.
absolutely.
The other two were both lauded for doing what they did, even though they may have had a different amount. One of the things you talked about was this idea of comparison. And I think that's so important because I think comparison is a killer to success. Can you talk about? I know you spend a lot of time with college students in the city of Conway. A lot of people don't know this, but Conway is called the city of colleges.
Yes.
There's 3 colleges there. We got Hendrix College, we got UCA, and we got Central Baptist, all right there in the city. And you have been instrumental over the years of building up a really robust and strong college ministry. What do you say to the young people who come to your church, or what do you say to the young people you get a chance to go and speak to at various events about this idea of not comparing themselves to others?
Pastor Strickland, I froze up for just a minute, but I think I caught your question there at the end. When I'm dealing with college students, and this is what I'm encouraging them to do, when you come to school, you need to find your passion. You need to find your niche. The biggest problem with college students is I think that they get well-meaning advice, but it's bad advice. And so this is what people tell them. They tell them, you go after this job because all of us were doctors. So you go to school to be a doctor. You go after this job because all of us were lawyers. So you go to be a lawyer. Even in the Greek community, the same thing. We got generations of this Greek organization, of that Greek organization. Or the parent says, you go to school for one of these 2 things because that's where the money is. And when students do that, and they're not passionate about that, and they don't really have the skill set for that, they can get those degrees and be miserable the rest of their life because they are doing something out of wanting the money, or doing something because they're trying to please the expectations of somebody else, and be miserable because they don't enjoy it. And you cannot maximize something that you're not gifted to do. And so what I encourage them to do, at least for their first year, take your base courses, but then really think about what you are passionate about, what are you good at, and let's guide you that way versus what society says you need to do. Because you and I both know when you are doing what God called you to do, it's really not hard work. You put in the work, but it is enjoyable work. But you can be making the most money in the world, quote unquote, 6-7-figure salary, and be absolutely miserable with what you do. So I encourage all of those students, listen, find your passion, find what you're good at, and go from there.
Yeah. Listen, you've been in ministry for a long time.
Yes.
We were in high school when you was leading opening service at Zion Temple, right? So what do you say to people who say, well, that's easy for you to say, Pastor Maltbia, you've known what you were called to do forever. I don't know what I'm called to do. I don't know what I'm passionate about. How do you begin to get people on the path to discovering what they're passionate about, so that I don't go to school and be an architect because that's where the money was, or I don't go to school and be an engineer because that's where the money is? Because Pastor Sean and I, we talk to people all the time, and I'm sure you do too, who are miserable in their jobs. But it's like, I got a master's degree, I got a bachelor's, a master's, and all these certifications in this particular field. How am I supposed to do something different? Especially people who, it's funny I say this, our age now, we ain't old, but I say our age, who may have been in their career 15, 20 years. How do I now go back and start over? And so the question really is, when we're talking about success and living a life of success, how do the people out there who are listening or going to listen to this podcast discover their passions if they don't know what it is right now?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. But I think, Brother Strickland, that it starts with exposure. You got to be
Mhm.
willing to step out of your comfort zone and be exposed to something greater, to be exposed to something different. That's a good thing about college is when you come in, if you would take the time to be exposed to different things, it can help you to find what you're passionate about, what you're good at. It's the same thing about going to a restaurant. Now, we grew up eating certain foods, and
Yep.
pretty much those certain foods were what we ate.
Yep.
But as we got older, as we got in different settings, we became exposed to different foods that sometimes it even takes your palate a minute to get adjusted to,
Sure enough.
but they're usually better for you and you enjoy them. Man, I would have never ate a Brussels sprout when we were growing up,
Nope.
but I was exposed to it, and now it's one of my go-to vegetables on my plate. And so I think it always starts with exposure, getting around environments and people who will show you something bigger than what you have experienced. And it's not always bigger, it's just simply different. But while I'm talking about this thing of exposure, I think it's also important for us to understand, and I'm talking about our ear gate and our eye gate, we have to be very careful who we open our spirit up to when it comes to exposure. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the other side for just a minute. And I don't even have to use a scripture for this, but I think you'll get it from this perspective. Now, I could go to the movies. We just had Halloween,
Yeah.
and I could go to a movie and see a scary movie.
Mhm.
And I don't intend when I go home to be afraid. But because I watched the scary movie, I normally go in my house, don't worry about turning on the light. But now I'm turning on every light in the house. Now I'm looking behind doors. Now I'm looking under my bed. Now, why am I doing that? Because I exposed myself to the wrong thing, and it took my focus to the wrong place. And so, just like we want to be exposed to the best things, we don't want to unnecessarily expose ourselves to some toxic traits and toxic people that it takes us a lot of work to work through and away from. Because as a man thinketh, so is he. And so when you hang out with junk, when you're exposed to junk, then that's what's going to be in your system. So again, I think it starts with exposure, but it has to be the right exposure.
You know, that's actually a very powerful concept because this idea of exposure leads us down the road also to this idea of what success looks like. If we grow up, you know, in certain environments or people come from certain backgrounds, um, a lot of people don't even know what is right or wrong in terms of how do I become quote unquote successful, even if I'm defining it by being all that God has called me to be, right? Because, like you said, exposure, I say it like this: it brings about it brings about an illumination. You know,
Mhm.
there are things that there's common knowledge to me now that wasn't common knowledge in 1994. There are things that I understand now that I didn't understand when I was in high school or when I was in college. And so how do you attribute your success in terms of having mentors who help to expose you? Because that's what a lot of people are needing. They need someone who can show them the right way. And I think about it in terms of I had a chance to be with you doing UCA's homecoming.
Mhm.
And I came by your service, and as pastors, we don't get to get out much, and so it was really great to just be able to sit and listen to someone else teach on a Sunday morning. But you were talking about controlling your emotions. Uh, if you come from a family where it is natural to go off on somebody when somebody say something to you, somebody say something sideways, and you quick to check them. You know, people use this term now: I match energy. You know, somebody do something crazy to me, I do something crazy to them. If that's all you know, then the researcher John Goodlad says we do as we have been exposed to. So
Mhm.
then what is your advice to people about being exposed to something other than what they may have been used to in terms of these are things you need to learn how to do to be successful?
Absolutely. Well, let's start right there talking about your emotions
Okay.
and talk about anger, the first
Okay.
one. And
Yep.
I'll give you a simple principle.
Okay.
I call it the 24-hour rule.
Okay.
Don't talk, don't text, don't type, don't email anybody for 24 hours. You've got to learn to bite your tongue. You
Mm,
cannot be in a leadership position
mm.
if your faculties or your emotional faculties are not in check, because God doesn't want somebody over his people that's a hothead.
Mm.
But supervisors don't want people in leadership positions or company owners that are hothead,
Come on.
because as you go up the leadership ladder, your words matter. Now, when the janitor gets mad at a corporation, that's one thing. But
Mhm.
when the CEO gets mad and says something, it's totally different.
Yeah.
So the first thing you got to do is learn to be quiet. And that might mean that you have to step in the back room. That might mean that you don't need to be around somebody.
Mm.
But for 24 hours, and I tell people from the church's perspective, a lot of times you simply need to talk to God before you talk to them. When
Mm.
you know it's somebody that's getting on your nerves or have hurt your feelings, you need to have a prayer meeting before you ever sit down and talk to them. Another thing when it comes to those type of emotions, anger, I think you need to know your warning signs. You
Oh.
need to know when you're starting to get hot under the collar. You
Mm.
don't wait till it's time for you to match energy. But when you know what, I'm irritated today. I hadn't got any rest. I hadn't got any sleep. You need to start making that change then and setting up proper boundaries then before you get to the place of blowing up. But it's not just anger, but it's also anxiety. It is when you get in a crunch, how do you handle what's going on?
Mm.
You got to know how to calm your spirit. You got to know how to be cool under pressure, because from a leadership perspective, you're setting the tone for everybody else. Now, you think about it as simple as a parent. If your kid hurts themselves and they're bleeding and they come running in, mommy, mommy, or daddy, you can flip out and make it worse, or your demeanor can calm them down so you can fix the boo-boo or send them to the hospital or whatever it is. But you've got to understand, if you want to be a good leader, you got to control your spirit, your anger. You got to learn how to be cool under pressure.
Yeah. One of the things that we often talk about in leadership is we talk about this idea of whether leadership is something that people are born with or whether leadership can be taught. Now, John Maxwell, who's one of the renowned leaders in the field of leadership, he says that leadership can be taught. This idea of successful traits, you kind of started to hit on that about the kind of demeanor that people need to have. When you think about yourself, when you think about the leaders who you've been around, when you think about the leaders who you look up to, what are some common traits that you could say, I think these are some things that have at least been a catalyst for me being successful? If someone who's listening to this says, okay, what are some traits of a really successful person? Because we say it like this, we say success leaves clues. And so if I can find a successful person, I can study them. And if I find a multitude of successful people, they probably have some things in common. So what are some common traits you would say that people should be aware of that lead to success?
Absolutely. And it's a lot of them I can think about,
Mhm.
but I think it all boils down to discipline.
Okay.
Leaders across the board have discipline. And one of the things that I think in the area of discipline that we need to start thinking about is discipline in our time. Because to one, much is given, much is required. And as you go up the ladder, you're going to have much more responsibility. So you have got to learn from the very beginning, foundational level, how to balance your time. Now, you mentioned a minute ago about all of those things that were on my bio over the years. And right now, I am a trustee at UCA, University of Central Arkansas. I'm on the board of directors for Conway Regional. I'm serving as senior pastor of our church. And oh yeah, I got a wife that I'm trying to nurture that relationship
Right.
and other things that are going on. And so time management is critical.
Mm.
And so here's the advice that I would give someone that is dealing with how do I get discipline in my time? And this is what I would say to you: two things. Number one, you need to remove the word and replace it with or.
Mm.
Not I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to do this or that. So this is what I do, Pastor Strick. Whenever an opportunity comes my way, part of the determining factor of whether or not I'm going to do it is if I add this to my plate, I have to be equally willing to take something off of my plate. If it's not important enough to replace something, then it's not important enough for me to add it to my agenda.
Mm.
Case in point, when the governor came to me and said, Pastor Maltbia, we'd like for you to be on the board of trustees for the University of Central Arkansas, my plate was totally full. But I knew part of my responsibility was to minister to college students, young professionals. Now, I was already doing that with the Arkansas Martin Luther King Commission because education is one of their 4 pillars of that organization. But I had to decide at that moment, do I need to stay at the King Commission or do I need to go to UCA? Because at this point in my life, I can't do both.
Do both.
And so I had to decide to resign from one so I could pick up the other. Now, the key to that was I didn't just walk away, but I gave them appropriate notice, helped them to find somebody to come in there and take my place, and then I moved on to something else. So when we're talking about that time, it is that and versus or. But here's another thing that we talk about at our local church. I think you should manage your time like we manage finances, particularly when we're in a deficit at the end of the month. This is what I tell people when you're in a deficit.
Okay.
You write your bills out in order of importance. Now, for me, that might be my tithe is going to, or my giving is going to come first, my house note, so forth, so on, things that I have collateral, things that don't have collateral, like credit card bills.
Right.
Now, what happens to most of us, we don't write our bills out in order of importance. We write them out based on due date. Think about that. So if your lights are due on the 1st and your rent is due on the 15th, you'll have lights and no place to live.
Come on.
So this is what you do. So when you write them in order of importance, when you run out of money, you write a cutoff line. Everything above the line gets your money. Everything below the line got to wait. So that way you'll always have a place to live, and Visa not coming to get that stuff no way. Now, at some point you want to be able to pay those things off, but you have a cutoff line. That's what you do with your time. For me, my relationship with God is first. My relationship with my wife is second. My family, then my responsibilities at the church, and then my community things. And I am a limited resource. Always remember this. We are limited resources, meaning we can't be everything to everybody all the time. And so what you do is when you run out of energy, you write a cutoff line. Everything above the line gets the best of you. Everything below the line has to wait. Here's what I tell my local church. You spend your most of your time and your energy on the people that's going to be crying at your funeral.
There you go. That's where your time should be spent. I love that idea because you really just solidified, at least for the people who are on here, who listen to me regularly and those who attend Fellowship of Champions. You literally just described, without calling it what I call it, which is the Eisenhower time management system. Now, what is the Eisenhower time management system? It was a time management system that was developed by our former president, Dwight Eisenhower. And here's what he says. He says, you take a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, you draw a vertical line and a horizontal line. He says, and that gives you 4 quadrants on that piece of paper. He says, in quadrant 1, you list everything that is urgent and important. That goes in quad 1. He says in quad 2, you put everything that is important but not urgent. He says in quadrant 3, everything that is urgent but not important. right? It's taking a lot of time, but it's not important. He said most people spend their time in quadrant 3, and that's the problem. He said most people don't spend a lot of time in quadrant 4 because quadrant 4 are things that are not urgent and not important. He said, so what happens is that people spend their life in quadrant 3 around things that are unimportant, around things that are urgent but not important. He says, and it just sucks all of your time. And so you equate that to people paying their bills based on what's due, not what's important. I can't tell you the number of times that we've had to help individuals because they did exactly what you said. I'm like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me you pay your gas bill and your water bill and your light bill, but not your rent?
Wait a minute, Rick. Let me add to that. In Conway, they get their nails done, they get their hair done, and they ain't paid their rent. I'm just saying.
It's so then now we talking about a mentality or a mindset. So there's a mindset to success, right? There's not only traits you need to have, but there's a mindset about successfulness. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is you started a church at a very young age, okay? Very young age. That church has been immensely successful in ministering to people and being an outlet for the community, not just in the city, but in the state and probably even nationally. When you started pastoring that church and you had to have the right kind of mindset for leading people, because people respect you a little more now just because you're 51. You got a little gray down there. Maybe not as much as me, but you got a little gray down there.
I try to keep it cut down low.
Folk will look at you now and assume you got a little wisdom. But 30 years ago, when you was 21 years old or so, starting this church, what was the mindset you had to have in order to say, I'm going to be successful with this definition of doing everything God told me to do?
Oh, man, that's good. Listen, I tell you what, Strick, it's all about surrounding yourself with the right people.
Come on.
That is so critical. Here is something that I read in the Bible, and it helped shape my mindset about people. So, there's a story in the Bible of the children of Israel, and they're getting ready to spy the land. They send out the spies. Yep. And a part of that group was Caleb and Joshua. Mm-hmm. And the Bible says that Caleb and Joshua had a different spirit. That's what God said. So you had the 10 spies that said, we can't do it. The 2 spies that said we could. And so they decided not to do it. But here's my point. Caleb and Joshua had a different spirit. But this is the part of the story that perplexed me. Even though they were connected with God, even though they had the right spirit, even though they had the right vision, they sat and suffered in that wilderness 40 years, just like everybody else, simply because they were connected to the wrong people. You have got to make sure, whatever you're going to do, that you are connected to the right people, because the wrong people will stop the supernatural from flowing in your life. The wrong people will stop you from reaching your best, the wrong people. And so I even think about that in Bible terms, the New Testament. You think about Jesus. The Bible says he couldn't do many miracles in his hometown, not because he wasn't God, but because of the folks' mentality, their belief system. When Jairus' child was dead and he got ready to heal the child, the first thing he had to do was kick the folks out that were doing all the laughing.
Amen.
You have got to get the right people around you to help you move forward. And so for me, it was the church. I made sure, for instance, and you'll get this one, Deacon Johnny Hopper. You remember Deacon Hopper, Brother Keith's father.
Yeah.
It was men like him that I kept around me, that when everybody was laughing about the church and everybody was saying it can't be done, I had people like Johnny Harper saying, boy, don't you give up. Boy, you can make it. I had people like my dad, Lee Maltbia, that said, you're a Maltbia. We don't quit. We keep moving forward. And it's that same thing. If you're around people who don't believe in education, they'll be the ones that will tell you, oh, that school ain't for you. Come home when you have a difficult exam or a difficult semester.
Mm.
So instead of putting the people around you that didn't graduate from back home, you put people around you like Pastor Strick that have made it through. You put upperclassmen around you to say, hey, I know what it's like to struggle your first semester. I know what it's like to eat beanie weenies and Roman noodles and all of that kind of stuff. And there's still a pathway for you to go forward. So beyond just your personal belief system, it is the community that you place around you that can be strong for you when you're second guessing yourself. Now, in that, I thought about this question as I was preparing to just talk to you today. And you posed this question to me offline. What is the greatest leadership lesson that I've learned that I wish I knew back then?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good segue to talk about that. For me, out of everything I've done, the greatest leadership lesson I wish I would have learned back then was to get rid of disgruntled people, to cut off disgruntled / toxic people. Because what I've learned over time is there are going to be some people that don't like you. I don't care how you bend over backwards. I don't care how you go out of your way. I don't care how you walk the extra 7 miles. They are committed in their heart. They're not going to like you. And therefore, you cannot spend precious time and energy trying to get their confirmation, trying to get their acceptance. I spent a lot of time as a young person trying to prove to people I was trying to do the right thing, trying to prove to people that I was called by God. And I got distracted by that, and I got hurt by that because I was chasing those people. The Bible says follow peace as long as it depends on you. There's a time that relationships have to be cut off. So I'll give you an example of that. And I work with Conway Regional Hospital. I've been on that board for 11 and a half years. Of course, I am not a medical person, but I look at a lot of reports. And here's what I've learned. You think about the human body, and oftentimes the Bible refers to the body of Christ as a metaphor for the human body. But here's something I found out. You can start with a gangrene or diabetes or an infection in your toe. And if you don't deal with that, before long, we've seen in our community quite a bit, it'll continue to grow and grow and grow to the point that you have to lose a whole leg, if not your life, because you didn't deal with it when it was in your toe. So why don't we do it just like what classic men do? Most men, when they get a pain, they ignore it for a few days. It's going to go away. You know, me and you 51, in the little pain. Oh, I'm just getting old now. You ignore it. Then the second thing you do is doctor it on it yourself. You don't go to the doctor and address it until it's really serious. And so what also happened was, for me, during those times, not only did I spend a lot of time and effort on people that I was never going to get to like me, I spent a lot of time and effort on people who showed me through their actions. You know, the Bible said, not the Bible, but the saying that we have all the time, when people tell you who they are, believe them.
Right.
Instead of me believing them, or I guess the Bible does say you know a tree by the fruit that it bears.
Right.
But instead of me believing them, I wanted to be liked so much. I wanted to be seen as a successful pastor so much. I kept that gangrene. I kept that infection around. And what happened was disgruntled people started making other people disgruntled. And if I would have just cut off that individual, that's all it would have been. But because I wanted so bad for them to like me, so bad for them to validate me, oftentimes I would let that thing grow, and whole limbs of the church had to be cut off. Not because I wasn't doing the successful things, but I wouldn't deal with that disgruntled person. Now I'm doing that from a church's perspective, but you do that in your businesses, you do that in corporate America. We keep disgruntled people around, hoping that one day they're going to change, when in reality, there comes a time that you say, you know what, enough is enough. We need to cut you off because you being here is making it much worse than better.
Yeah, I've had some experiences. You said a lot there, and I wanna go back to a couple of things, but having the opportunity to work in corporate America on the educational side of it, one of the things that I had a mentor tell me, and I kept it to heart after I went through something similar to what you spoke about in a job. He told me, he said, Edwin, he said, hire slow, fire fast. And I never forgot that. He said, you take your time in vetting the people who you need to have on your team. He said, but when you discover that they're not just on the wrong spot on the team, because sometimes you can be on the right bus, but in the wrong seat.
Yes.
Maybe you're supposed to be up front, but you're sitting in the back, or you're supposed to be in the back and you're up front. He said, but once you've ascertained that they are on the wrong bus, he says, do not delay in getting them off the bus. And that really goes along to what you were saying about this idea of removing disgruntled people, because it's the Bible kind of says it like this. It says that a little leaven or a little yeast will make the whole cake rise. Well, we also know that if you take a rotten apple and you put that one rotten apple in that barrel of apples, that before long it will contaminate the entire barrel. We
Absolutely.
talk about it like this all the time. We say there are four things that you have to tame. And we talk about this in terms of being successful. You mentioned one of them. If you want to be successful, the first thing you have to learn to do, I think internally, is you got to learn to tame your thoughts. That goes back to what you were talking about, emotions. If you don't learn to tame, to push that pause button, I think you use the acronym HALT. If you don't learn to do something to stop those thoughts from becoming verbiage that you just spill out whenever you get emotionally charged, it's going to hinder you. The second thing you got to learn to do when you learn to tame that thought is you got to learn to tame that tongue. You can't say everything you feel. I'm sure as a pastor, it's a whole lot of stuff that you have wanted to say to people, to organizations, and different things at different times. But you have to remember, we're playing the long game. And when you're
Yes.
playing the long game, you can't always just go nuclear every time you want to. And then the other thing we said you have to do is you have to learn to tame your temperament, your heart.
Mhm.
Everything can't be personal. Everything you can't, if you're going to be successful, you cannot be a person who cannot take feedback, who cannot take criticism. And people think that the word criticism is a bad thing. Criticism is not bad. And I guess if you use the term critique, different than criticism, but because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean they don't like you as a person. And you
Right.
have to learn to get over that. And then that last thing you talked about, which we call it, you got to learn to tame your team. You got to surround yourself with the right people. You got to tame your thoughts. You got to tame your tongue. You got to tame your temperament. And you got to tame your team. Your team, I can look at a person, EC, and I can tell you whether or not that person is on track to being successful, meaning they're on track to reaching everything God told them based on who they got around them.
Absolutely.
Research
Absolutely.
says you can look at your 5 closest friends and we'll know everything we need to know about you. And so one of the
Absolutely.
things that I think is important is this idea of younger people, but even older people too, making sure they're surrounding themselves with the right kind of people around them. People come with different attitudes. You and I, we're friends, but I listen to you and I listen to people like my wife. I listen to some of the people who are on my ministerial team, and they like you, they they tend to be longer suffering with some people than I am. I have to work not to cut you off real quick. And so there's a balance there. Wouldn't you say that you have to, because people can hear things and they go, "Oh, Pastor Maltbia said cut them all off." That ain't what Pastor Maltbia said.
No.
Pastor
No.
Maltbia said you have to learn to watch people through their actions, and then by asking Holy Spirit, make the determination, is this good for me? Because I would say that relationships should be reciprocal. That
Absolutely.
it should not be you pouring in everything to them, and at every turn they find a way to criticize.
Absolutely. And I think to really add to that, Pastor Strickland, I think another key part of leadership is having the appropriate expectation of people. Now, if you go back to what we talked about at the beginning, you got the 1 talent, the 2 talent, 5 talent. And so you don't want to set people up for failure. The worst thing you can do is take a 1 talent person that has the expertise potential, because they're going to grow, but the potential to be a 2, you don't want to put them in a 5 talent position.
Yep.
You need to know you need to taper your expectations of people. And so what happens is, and this is what I found out, another thing I would tell leaders is, don't take everything personal. Because here's what I found out. It's not that everybody is against me. Some folks are just for themselves. And that's a big difference.
Okay, hold on. So y'all need to hear that. You need to say la on that, or as one person said, you need to Sheila on that for a minute. It's not that everybody is against you. And I need you, the listeners, I need you to hear that. That's right, Lamorne. That's a mouthful. It is not that everybody is against you. Baby, they are just for themselves. You just happen to be in their way.
That's the bottom line.
Not personal.
And it doesn't even have to be all that deep. On your way to work, that person that jumped out in front of you, they wasn't trying to sabotage you. They were just trying to get to work like you were, and they found a spot to get in.
They did not wake up and say, when I get on Hawk Rider, or when I get on College Avenue, I am going to pull over in front of the first black Escalade I see. They did not say that.
No, sir. And we have to know that so you have to get your expectations together when it comes to people. And so another thing, just as we're talking about leadership principles, and you and I have talked about this offline in different settings, I think one of the key things of a leader is to be a lifelong learner.
Oh, that's good.
Because one of the dangers of being a successful person is to get prideful. And pride to me is whenever you start thinking, I can do this by myself. Whenever I start thinking I can preach a sermon without praying, or I can be a good husband without following the principles and praying. Whenever you start thinking you can do this alone and you got everything and the world revolves around you, that's a dangerous position to be in. And so when you are a lifelong learner, you understand that it is important that you remain relevant. Now, this is something that I teach as I cross in corporate America and in the churches, but I often make this statement. Things that begin extraordinary soon become ordinary, and if not modified or changed, they become outdated. Now, think about me and you when we were in high school. The bag phone was extraordinary. You remember them bag telephones?
Listen, that big brick bag phone.
Listen, man, you had to plug it into the cigarette lighter. The cars don't even have cigarette lighters now. And you put it up on top of the car sometime for good reception. Them things were extraordinary.
Yeah.
But soon they became ordinary. Now they're completely outdated. You don't even see them anymore. You think about companies like Blockbuster that were cutting edge at one time.
Yeah.
Don't even exist anymore. So what we have got to do is, whatever our craft is, whether it's in corporate America or in the church world or being a stay-at-home mom or somewhere in between, you've got to be that lifelong learner that is always willing to stay relevant. In the church world, we kind of say it like this. The message never changes, but the method of how we give it out changes all the time. And one thing I think COVID taught us was to change the method to get the message out. And so we're doing online things like you and I are doing here. But you've got to know your audience. Because when I go in corporate America, the same principles, but my presentation is a little bit different.
Right.
When I go to what traditionally people would call interdenominational Bible churches, my presentation is a little different than when I go to the Church of God in Christ where we grew up.
Right.
The message is always the same, but the method is a little bit different. And so you've got to understand that when you go in different and before different audiences, you need to adjust yourself appropriately. Like, for instance, when I'm preaching on Sunday mornings at our church, I might talk about fornication, or I might talk about adultery. But when I'm over on the campus, I'm going to talk about sneaky links.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When I'm at the home church, I might talk like the old folks and say, sleeping around.
Right, right. Or shacking.
Shacking. But I'm on the campus talking about what's your body count.
Right.
Same message, different method. And in the same sense, when we start talking about this is why I feel like a lot of our young men are not successful, because they have this mindset. It is what it is. You take me or don't take me. I'm just like this. But when you go in certain settings, you got to change your dress.
Yeah.
When you go in certain settings, there are things that you need to adjust to because of the setting that you're going to. When I go to a traditional church, now the way I'm dressed now, this is kind of how you and I do things. But when I go to a very traditional church, I dress in a very traditional suit. Why? Because I don't want my appearance to get in the way of the message that I'm giving.
Right.
And what is happening to a lot of young leaders is we're letting our outward appearance, whatever that means, get in the way of selling ourselves, the message we're giving, because we will not be relevant to the place and the people we're around. So even in my sense, whatever level of success I'm on, I want to always know who my audience is, and I'm going to adjust myself appropriately. Paul said, I became all things to all men to gain some.
Yeah. I think, we're almost at our hour, but I think that is a wonderful presentation of what needs to happen more with some of our young people. Because what's happening with our young people is they are showing up, and what they are saying is, here is who I am. And I'm going to dress this way. I'm going to talk this way. I'm going to be this way. And you need to hire me. And as a result, they're not respecting the environment or the culture that they're trying to get into. I'll use it like this. It would be like someone coming to me. I just celebrated 30 years in my fraternity. It would be like someone coming to me and telling me that they want to be in my fraternity, but they are going to be who they're going to be in the way they want to be it, and I got to let them in. There's no way you're getting in that way. You got to show up with a presentation that says, I match what you're looking for. One of the things I think that happens with people in this realm of success is they get stuck in what I call a fixed mindset, as opposed to a growth mindset. A growth mindset says, when I go to apply for a job, I don't care that I don't like wearing suits and ties. On my first interview, I'm going to show up in a suit and tie if I'm trying to get a job in corporate America. It doesn't matter that the person interviewing me is not in a suit and tie. They already got the job. I need to show up in a way that presents myself that says I understand what the culture is. And I think that sometimes too, we've actually allowed that mentality to creep into the church.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with having casual service if that's what you want to do. Nothing wrong with it all. We do the same thing. But at the same time, there is an appropriateness about what you are to wear. There is an appropriateness about how you should behave in a church environment. And now what happens is folks will get offended if you begin to tell them that they need to respect the culture, that they need to respect the behavior. If I come to your church and your church happens to be a much more progressive church, right? But then I happen to go to another friend's church and that is a more conservative church. Mm-hmm. I need to know that so I know how to behave. I don't go to the conservative church and jump up and scream, hallelujah, in the middle of the message.
Absolutely.
That's not the way you conduct yourself. So what I hear you saying is, if people want to be successful, they need to understand how to navigate the ins and outs of various environments. That's what I heard you
Absolutely.
say.
Man, that's true. And I'll give you something very simple. So my wife is, I call her fashion diva. You know, she dresses young, she looks good, all of those kind of things. And so she tells me, and sometimes we get into discussions. So when I go to corporate America, meetings in corporate America, or let me say when I go to meet, when me and her go out on the town, whatever the case is, she'll tell me, you pull that shirt out. Don't have that down in your pants, in your waist. But when I go to UCA,
Yeah.
and when I go to Conway Regional, and when I go to board meetings, every man in there has
Yeah.
got their shirt tucked in.
Yeah.
And if I come in there without it,
With a
they
belt
don't
on.
take me serious.
With a belt
With a
on.
belt on.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a belt on tucked in there. And that, hey.
Yeah.
But to be taken serious in that industry, you have to match that energy. Now, as I have become a senior person in some of those areas, then I can bring a little bit more of my own flavor because I've already proven myself through my work.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of us, they will never even talk to us because of the way we present ourselves in the very beginning.
I had someone say to me one time, and I think this is something you'll understand. I was talking to them about the presentation as they got ready to go for a job interview, and they said to me, "Well, you know, Jay-Z is in boardroom with billionaires. He don't dress like that." I said, "You missed the key principle. Jay-Z is a billionaire. when you are already at the table, you can do something a little different. When you're trying to come to the table, you need to match in some way and respect the culture of that." And so I think that's great. I think that's a principle that people can really get about these keys to success. Listen, if you had to leave our audience today with maybe something that was a leadership challenge for you that in hindsight you would do differently, or if you could leave them with some words of encouragement about things they should be doing to get on the track and stay on track to being successful, what would it be? I'll let you have the last words.
Well, Strick, I would simply say this to everyone. Because sometimes, and the young people here at True Holiness say, life be life, and life be life.
You say that all the time.
And sometimes, man, things knock you to your knees. And sometimes it feels like everything is out of control. Here's what I would say to you. If you're in a point in your life, a season of difficulty, a season of frustration, a season that feels like that everything is out of control, I want you to refocus and remember, I don't care what's going on in your life. There are some things you can control. I don't care what's going on. I'll give you a couple and I'll leave it with this. Number one, you can control how much you pray.
Okay.
That is significant on many levels.
Absolutely.
Some would just say meditate, but you can control that. Number two, you can control who you voluntarily spend time with.
Yes, you can.
Your ear gate and your eye gate. And number three, you can control whether you throw in the towel. I don't care what's going on in your life. Refocus and remember, there are some things you can control.
I love it. There are some things. Everybody put that in the comment section. Say, there are things that I can control. Everybody who's listening right now, type that in the comment section. Listen, Pastor Maltbia, if there are people in the Central Arkansas area, COVID sent a lot of people home, and a lot of people didn't come back to church.
Yes.
And they say they going to church, but they really not. Sometimes they may pop in for 5 minutes on a broadcast and call it church. But if there are some people in Central Arkansas and they say, hey, I am looking for a good Bible teaching church, tell the people how they can find True Holiness Saint Center.
Absolutely. It's True Holiness Saint Center in the city of Conway, 198 Highway 286 East. That's 198 Highway 286 East in the city of Conway. But you can go to our website, of course, trueholiness.net. If you're a Facebook person like some of the older ones are, you can find us there, True Holiness Saint Center. But I would encourage you, if you're curious about True Holiness, to go to your app store and look up True Holiness Virtual Campus in
Okay.
Conway, Arkansas. That is an app that it took the church about 8 months to develop, but it's everything True Holiness. It has not only my sermons there, but it has sermon notes. It has ways for you to connect with us. It talks all about what we believe while we're here. But that True Holiness Virtual Campus, download that app. It's 100% free to you. It's just a service that we have, but we would love to have you come. People ask me all the time, Pastor Strickland, if I come to your church, what do I wear? There's one qualification. Wear some clothes. If you can manage that, you good with us. Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Listen, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I know your time is valuable. I appreciate you carving it out. I'm seeing the comments. People are saying this was a good conversation. I think the thing that you ended with, the fact that there are things we can control. I can control how much time I spend in prayer. And again, when we talk about prayer, we ain't talking about you just begging God. We talking about you spending some time listening to what God is telling you to do. You can certainly spend time. You certainly determine who you spend your time with. That is so incredibly important. I think those two are just major. We can control what we can determine what we can control. And the things we can't, we shouldn't be worried about. We get those to God. EC, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm going to say my goodbyes. I'm going to take you off the broadcast, but don't leave. I got something I want to say to you real quick offline. Listen, I appreciate you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Next week, we're going to do this again. I got my business man coming. I got Lemoyne Robinson. If you have been watching him and his wife, Crystal, on Love and Business on Thursday nights, you know that he has some sayings that are some of the countryest, but the best making sense statements you can ever hear. And I can't wait for him to come and share some of those. So we're going to be right back here. Same bat time, same bat station. Next week, I'm going to have my man, Lemoyne Robinson, business owner, State Farm business owner, multiple business owner, him and his wife, and he's going to be here. And honestly, I got about 6 things that we may talk about. We hadn't decided which one it's going to be yet. So you show up, and I guarantee you're going to have a great time, okay? All right, I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you all again next week, all right? God bless and have a great day.